Ladies and gentlemen, hello and welcome to another edition of Changing the Questions. My name is Paul Laporte, back with you once again after a long hiatus, my usual partner in crime, Mr. Mike Miner.
Hey, how's it going, guys? Almost didn't make it today.
Yeah, I know. It is quite snowy and blustery out there today, but we wanted to make sure that we delivered all the exciting content you expect from us here at Changing the Questions, and today we have an episode that we have been mulling around for a little while.
Controversial, would you say?
I think
just a little bit.
Will probably be our most controversial episode. Also, this episode is going to have less of the joking and the joviality that you're probably used to. This episode, the question that we will be looking at is whether or not WWE should recognize Chris Benoit. For those of you who are fairly new to professional wrestling, I can't imagine it's a lot of you out there, but Chris Benoit, of course, a very well-known wrestler throughout the mid to late 90s, early 2000s. Very, very well respected. He's considered one of the best in-ring workers of all time. In 2007, he murdered his wife and son and then killed himself. And ever since then, WWE has basically refused to acknowledge his existence to the point where they started off by editing him out of DVDs, just completely trying to wipe him from existence.
Commentary that refers to him.
Yes.
All sorts of things. And
since the debut of the WWE Network, they've backed on that a little bit. They show events where Chris Benoit matches are featured.
They just won't promote the events with him on it.
Exactly.
They just won't promote him as being on there, and so he'll just be there, but nothing saying, "Oh, here's Chris Benoit, watch his match."
However, recently there was a bit of news in a WWE encyclopedia that's coming out that actually mentions and references not only Chris Benoit, but the incident that ended his life and the life of his wife and his son.
They absolutely should, though, because it's...
Okay, well...
we'll get to that,
that's the question we're going to be getting into. It's the fact of, should WWE recognize Chris Benoit's accomplishments? There's a lot of talk around the internet about this, about Chris Benoit, the performer, is not the same thing as Chris Benoit, the person, and that just because the person did horrible things doesn't mean you can't erase what that character did artistically. Miner, let's start with you on this one.
Boy, as far as acknowledging his, I could see why they back away, and rightfully so, because it's from a business perspective, you're probably not going to want to promote a known murderer. It's hard to, it's something hard to get behind. It's smart business. You just don't want to do it. And I'm not one to go, the business this, business that, but you don't want to do that. And for them to want to promote somebody like that would be suicide, I guess. Bad choice of words, I guess, but, it's... should they acknowledge him as far as, like, an encyclopedia entry? Absolutely. He was a part of their history. You can't act like he doesn't exist, although they have up until this point for the most part, but it's more of protecting themselves and not wanting to be associated with something so brutal and drastic.
So as far as like if they're doing like any sort of publication or show on like the world title history or something like that, you think that he should be mentioned in those sort of things?
They've even scrubbed him from world title history talk. I mean, they'll acknowledge that he won the championship as far as like a blurb saying, "Oh, this Chris Benoit guy won this," but they won't go into much more detail than that.
Mm-hmm.
And it's it's completely understandable. I had somewhere else I was going with this, but it's just off the top of my head.
All right, so let me ask you, do you think that WWE should do any sort of, like they reference it in the encyclopedia, should they at any point do any sort of, I don't want to say, basically reference it in some sort of like actual interview or journalistic form to have the wrestlers or people who are kind of involved in that whole time discuss it, and then just like do some sort of thing on the backstory, on the history, things like that, like some sort of documentary that should be done in any sort of official capacity?
if they wanted to go that far, I'd say, yeah, why not? Acknowledge what happened and get backstories from those around him, closest to him, and go from there. But, don't glorify the guy.
Okay.
No matter, character or not. The guy who played the character is the guy that killed his wife and kid, and you can't get past that. I don't care who you are, what you say. You can't say this guy's got to go in the Hall of Fame, and
oh god,
I've seen that
go
around so often lately. It's absurd, but it's you can't say, well, the guy was different, or the legacy that he left basically is, I guess, them doing concussion testing now. That's impact testing and all that. It's just, if there was any positive to come out of this, they take it a lot more seriously now because of what happened to him. They said his brain was like that of an 80-year-old Alzheimer's patient.
And I think that fact is one that people who, I don't want to say apologists, but that's kind of what they are. That's kind of the thing that they hold on to, is that, he wasn't in, his brain was just completely ruined and destroyed, and you really can't dispute that. That is a medical and scientific fact. Did that contribute to what happened? Almost certainly.
Yeah.
But where it becomes just a really shaky issue is there are a lot of people, like really an upsetting amount of people on the internet who they basically are willing to give Benoit a pass because he was a good wrestler. So
no, don't get it wrong. He was a fantastic,
right.
One of the greatest. And the shame about it is his legacy has been pretty much scrubbed.
And I'll
it's
see
nuts.
Yeah, and I'll see people with like Chris Benoit pictures on their Facebook profile, or they'll mention that they're a fan of Chris Benoit, but they don't want to talk about his personal life at all. And
it's weird. Yeah. I mean, I don't want to talk about his personal life either, but you can't. It's just
you have to have to talk.
It always gravitates back toward that point. Wasn't that the guy that murdered his family? Yes, it is. You can't get past that.
Yeah,
there's no way you can. And if somebody says that you can, it's
no. and whenever I was talking to a friend of mine yesterday who was talking about how he went and watched one of his favorite matches is the Ultimate Submission match between Benoit and Angle, and I just told him I can't watch Benoit matches anymore. Benoit was one of my absolute favorite wrestlers in the world, bar none, full stop. But the day that he did that, for whatever reason, under whatever deteriorated mental state he was in, that changed everything. And I cannot look at the guy and go, oh, this was a good match. I don't really care if he murdered his wife and his 10-year-old son.
Something like that.
Yeah,
he was his
young son,
very, very young.
And I just can't do it. If you can do it, okay, fine. But for the people out there who really kind of treat him with this really weird respect, not only does it feel to me like some of those people, it's we're willing to forgive the fact that he killed two people because he was really good at fake fighting guys, but it's a thing to me where it's they don't really. It's just one of those weird things where they don't care about the life of a woman and of a kid because that was their hero. And think about it this way though, and this is where this kind of troubles me, and as far as if we're going to start giving Benoit accolades again. You're a wrestling fan, new wrestling fan, you're just coming in, specifically if you're female, okay? You hear all of these people on these internet message boards and whatever talking about how awesome Chris Benoit is or whatever, and then you go and you do some research on to Chris Benoit and you find out what really happened. What is your view of the wrestling business going to be if everybody just kind of pretends that shit didn't happen? For somebody to say oh, I really like Chris Benoit and I don't want to talk about what happened, that's not fair. You can't. That's part of who that person is, and you can't yeah, he was an awesome wrestler, he killed his wife and his son. And I just feel if WWE wants to just wipe every bit of existence away from the guy, I don't care. It's a work. The business is a work. He was a world champion not because he beat somebody in an athletic competition, but because they decided they wanted him to have that. And when he lost it, they decided that he wanted him to lose it. And the question I always ask to people...
Again, it was what was best for... I know it's thrown around so much, it's best for business. That's what they thought was best for business at the time. So, like you said, it's a work.
And here's...
Nobody earns it. They're given it. And he was given that at the time.
You certainly earn it from working harder, and you can get certain things. But ultimately, as far as championships go, for title histories, this was a thing they decided that they wanted you to have. And here's the question I always pose to people who kind of get on the defense of Benoit, or at least the fact of they shouldn't try and erase him from history. It didn't happen. If the person who did what he did, if it's JBL, does anybody give a shit about them wiping him from history? Does anybody care at all? And JBL is a good comparison, number one, because he's probably going into the Hall of Fame soon. And number two, because he had a backstage reputation very, very similar to Chris Benoit. He was brutal on new guys. He hazed relentlessly. He was really cruel and exhibited some really twisted bullying behavior, much in the way that Benoit did. But Benoit got away with it because he was respected, and JBL was the one who was viewed as the asshole. So if JBL did this stuff, would anybody care about them getting rid of his title runs or his, removing his accomplishments from the record books? I don't think so. I think it's just this weird thing where there's a subset of professional wrestling fans who they just... I don't know if it's they just want to be confrontational, or if they're really there's just something fucking wrong with them, that they're okay with this guy doing this because he was a really good wrestler. I don't know. That's just kind of how I feel on it. But if WWE wants to if they want to address it, fine, but holy shit, be careful. That is some mighty, mighty, mighty thin ice you're treading on. And I don't know if I'd be the person who wants to tread on that. Not only are you treading on it with looking bad to the public, but you're treading on it with looking bad to the people who work for you that had to go through that day. If they think you're profiting off of it, you are going to get a lot of bad blood from a lot of places. And I just don't think that whatever monetary gain you stand to make off of actually addressing that day is going to counterbalance the bad publicity and bad feelings you're going to get both externally and internally in that company.
Tell us how you really feel. No, I mean, for the most part, I can agree. They scrubbed him as much as they could. Just above cutting every single clip of him out of every piece of archival footage that they could. If they wanted to, they could do that as well. But
it would take a long time.
It would take a very long time, a lot of work, and it's just one of those things where they know he existed. They're not going to cut him out completely, and they're not trying to profit off of him. He just happens to be there at that time in history before he did this. That's all it is. That's all they're going to leave it to, and they're not going to acknowledge him any further. And like I said, I can't blame them. It's just too controversial of a subject to delve into. Maybe 10, 20 years down the line, they'll touch upon it. You never know. But as far as the Hall of Fame bid goes, as far as him going to the Hall of Fame, it's not going to happen.
Never, ever.
I don't care who it is. If somebody wants to tread that ground, they're risking their credibility as far as,
I mean, think of it. Owen Hart's not in the Hall of Fame, and he died at a show.
Yeah, and people are gonna refer back to his wife saying, she doesn't want to be in there.
Right, and that's fine. But I'm sure that there are a lot of people who would not. I'm sure the family of Nancy Benoit would not want him in there. You know?
Absolutely not, and rightfully so.
Absolutely.
I mean, Jimmy Snuka. What about him? What are your thoughts on
That's
him?
another question.
That's another one. Maybe we should bring that up later on.
I think Jimmy Snuka is definitely it's a similar case, but it's different in the fact that the details of that came out way after the fact. You can certainly argue that WWE should not have been, or WWF at the time, should not have been nearly as lenient as they were when that incident actually happened, and we don't really have the time to get into that on this episode.
Yeah.
If you don't know the Jimmy Snuka details about what happened with him, go ahead and look that up. you could certainly make the argument that WWF, whatever, should not have been that lenient with him when it happened. But the fact of the matter is that he was originally found innocent, that he didn't, and the case was reopened, and now that may not be the case. And if they want to remove him from the Hall of Fame or remove him, okay, fine.
My last thing that I'm going to say, well, people say, oh, Chris Benoit, he was an entertainer, he had the matches, I can watch this, and, I kind of have the matches off to the side. I get what they're saying. That's fine. You can watch the matches. If you can separate the match from the performer, and, the performer from the person, okay, I get it. But as far as the match goes, okay, fine. But there's a certain point where you can't separate the person from the performer when he murders somebody. The guy that played the performer, the guy that was a performer, murdered his family. It's just like, it's like the whole Bill Cosby thing. How many people are going to say, oh, I'm going to go watch the Cosby Show, I can separate the performer from the person. And you know what? I guarantee a lot of these people that are saying this about Chris Benoit are the same ones that are ripping on Bill Cosby. And I can't get behind either of those men, no matter what. It's, you can say it's apples to oranges and whatever else, but you know what? Rape and murder are probably the two worst things in this world that you can do to anybody. And you know what?
It doesn't matter how good of an artist you were.
No.
That doesn't erase the fact.
It doesn't erase the fact that you did it. And, it's as simple as that. And who's going to want to promote you at that point?
All right, ladies and gentlemen, that's going to wrap it up. We are running a little on in this episode. We're going to go ahead and wrap it here. We are interested in hearing what you think. If you want to leave us any feedback, you can send us an email at changingthequestions@gmail.com. You can also send us a message on Twitter at changingtheqs, which is at changingtheqs. Also, be sure to check us out on Facebook, where you get information about our shows, as well as some other things we like to put up. Also, be sure to check out our YouTube page. If you're listening to this on YouTube right now, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe, please. That helps us out a lot. If you're listening to this on iTunes, be sure to leave us a nice 5-star review, give us some comments. Also, if you're listening to this on iTunes and you want to check out all the back episodes, head over to the YouTube page. That's where the full archives are. That's going to wrap it up for this episode of Changing the Questions. For Mike Miner, I'm Paul Laporte. Thank you so much. We'll see you again soon.
Thanks, guys.
Goodbye.